What does the future look like to you? Flying cars? A perfect utopia? A barren wasteland? What about a future where the government had access to every single person's DNA, meaning they had an exact copy of what supposedly made you unique? A countrywide DNA database could be very close to happening in the near future. Is it good? Is it bad? Let's find out. DNA, also known as deoxyribonucleic acid, is a genetic code that determines all the characteristics of a living thing, according to 23andme.org. All it takes to get someone's DNA is a mere blood sample or a procedure called a buccal test, where the inside of your mouth is swabbed. From there, the DNA is extracted from the swab and separated into size by a process known as glue electrophoresis. The DNA is put into wells at one end of a porous gel, and an electric circuit is applied which pulls the negatively charged DNA through the gel. The shorter pieces of DNA move through the gel easier than the longer ones. The DNA is then presented onto a nylon membrane which is X-rayed, and it produces a sheet of dark bands of various length, which is a DNA fingerprint, according to how stuff works. A DNA database is basically a system that files and stores people's DNA profiles. The DNA database is meant to be maintained by the government. So what's the big deal? What can the government do with your DNA? Well, DNA can reveal an extraordinary amount of private information about you, including familial relationships, medical history, predisposition for disease, and possibly even behavioral tendencies and sexual orientation, all according to 23andMe. Now you know a little bit about the topic, here are some pros and cons of having a nationwide DNA database. The first pro is it is easier to catch criminals. DNA is everywhere. DNA has a half-life of 581 years, according to Encyclopedia Britannica. Rarely does it ever stay preserved, but with technology improving, forensics teams are able to locate possible suspects from DNA samples left over 50 years ago, according to The Atlantic. Another pro is that police would not have to go through the whole hassle of trying to get samples from suspects and wait for them to get analyzed by a lab. With everyone's DNA in a database, they can simply look for a match. With the whole population of DNA, researchers could also get a better understanding of how some diseases are getting passed down and who has higher risks of getting them. Last, it can also inform the public about their health sooner and more effectively. DNA is what makes you, you. Certain genes can make people more susceptible to diseases, such as diabetes, breast cancer, and many other things. Knowing if you have these genes, people can live their life accordingly to prevent those certain diseases, which is according to the Huffington Post. However, when there's good, there's also bad. Here are some of the cons. There can be some sketchy things that direct-to-consumer genetic testing companies are doing with all the genetic information. For one, they have deals with numerous data-sharing deals with drug companies and researchers. They still need consent to send it, but there is no way of knowing what the company is actually doing with your DNA, meaning these companies can be using your DNA for experiments. Also, there is a feeling of lack of privacy you get knowing that the government has your DNA. That is supposed to be something that only you have. So, the DNA could be inaccurate or misanalyzed. There have been many cases where DNA has been analyzed incorrectly. In 1999, Josiah Sutton was arrested for the rape of a 41-year-old woman because his DNA was found on her. However, the DNA was wrongly analyzed, which led to Josiah being wrongly imprisoned for 4 years. Another con is that the DNA database can possibly get hacked. With the government owning all of our DNA, it can be an easy target for hackers. With our DNA, hackers can use this information to attack someone personally by exposing their faulty DNA traits that could eventually lead a company to fire them. Not only could hackers use DNA traits to ruin people's lives, but people could get severe anxiety or depression knowing the possible diseases and conditions that they are susceptible to. To be quite honest, I don't really know which side to take. I strongly believe that with everyone's DNA in a database, it can greatly reduce crime and increase the productivity of the judiciary system. However, I feel that by giving up my DNA, I am giving up something that is personal to me, something that makes me unique from everyone else, is now available for anyone to see.